friends, I'm Kyla and welcome back to the Infinite Library, and today we're going to be doing my August wrap up, and I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible because, to be honest, I have a lot of books to talk about and I don't really want to spend ages talking about them, so we're going to attempt to keep this brief, the spark notes of wrap-ups, shall we say. So first we'll do the stats and get those out of the way. In the month of August, I read 17 books and I finished the month with 3 ongoing books, funnily enough. But yeah, 17 was the number that I managed to complete in the month of August, which is less than I did last month, but I read more manga last month, so that kind of checks out. I was definitely feeling a little bit slumpy in August. I was a little bit unwell at times, so I still think 17 is really good though. But yeah, I'm not surprised I'm a little bit less than July. So in total I read 5,800 pages. Format wise, I read 15 of these books physically, 7 via audio, 1 digitally and 1 in tandem, so a mix of audio and physically. The genres are a little bit different than what I normally have. As always, my main genre is fantasy, of which I read 10. Then we have 4 non-fiction, which I'm pretty sure most of those are down to me doing the Goodreads challenge. And then other genres that I read was 2 manga, 2 horror, 2 thriller, 1 graphic novel, 1 sci-fi, and 1 contemporary fiction. And then the source where I got these from, 10 were from the library, 8 were bought, which is really bad for me. 3 were from my existing TBR, 1 was an ARC, and 1 was a reread. And then finally, the ratings. No 1 stars, 3 2 stars, which I'm not very happy about, 4 3 stars, 8 4 stars, and 2 5 stars. I also had 3 DNFs this month, and overall that comes to an average rating of 3.8. Let us get on to the actual books in question. I'm going to go over my DNFs and my ongoing books first, just to get those out of the way. So I DNF'd 3 books in this month, and honestly all of them are kind of soft DNFs. They were books that I didn't necessarily hate, I just really wasn't kind of vibing with them. So the first one was actually an ARC, which I hate to do. I don't like to DNF ARCs, but I was just really struggling to get into this one, and because I was feeling a little bit slumpy in terms of my reading, I didn't really want to push myself through something that I was just not vibing with. So this was, I want to say it's a Danmei, but it's actually not, but it's very inspired by Danmei, and it's called Legend of the White Snake by Shirley. It releases the 20th of September, I believe, and I got a digital ARC of this from NetGalley. Basically, it is about these 2 boys who I guess end up falling in love. It's set in historical China, I think, and it's based off an actual legend, which is the Legend of the White Snake, except they've gender flipped it. And essentially we're following a prince and a boy who isn't really a boy but is actually a snake who can take human form, and it was okay. It's a YA fantasy BL, and I just wasn't getting invested in it, so I just decided to put it aside. It just wasn't really working for me. I can see it working for other people. I do think it's probably going to be fairly popular, but I just was not getting invested basically, so I decided to drop it after about 100 pages or so. I then DNF'd 2 books, which were books I was reading for Yalk. I'm just trying to get through as many authors' work as possible, but if I'm not really super vibing with it, then I'm probably just not going to finish it because I'm trying to get through as many as I can. And if I'm already feeling like this is not going to be a great book for me, then I don't really need to finish it, because the whole point of me reading these is to learn more about authors' works, to see if I want to meet them at the event and go to their panels. So the first one I DNF'd was This Book Kills by Ravena Goran. It's a YA thriller, kind of dark academia-ish, and I liked the premise of this one. Basically the main girl, she kind of writes a story, and in the story there's a murder, and then someone actually dies in the school who is her friend's boyfriend, except it's all very messy because he recently dumped his long-term girlfriend for her, and he dies in basically the exact same way as her story says. And then she gets a message basically being like, oh, thanks for the idea, you know. So that kind of puts her as a big suspect, so she is trying to investigate to work out who it is. And I thought it was a great premise, but I just was not getting invested into it, unfortunately. I could kind of see where the story was going, and I really wasn't interested in anything except who the actual killer was, so I kind of just sped forward, found out who it was, and wasn't really happy with that either, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna drop this. I got a decent way through this one, I think. Over 100 pages again, but yeah, I was reading many other things, and this one had to go back to the library fairly quickly, and I just didn't really care enough to go and finish it, so yeah, I DNF'd it. Certainly not a bad book, but YA thrillers just aren't always for me, unfortunately, and this just wasn't quite as exciting and fun as I was hoping it was going to be. My last DNF then was a YA fantasy called All the Hidden Monsters by Amy Jordan. I did not get very far into this one at all, to be honest. This had an interesting premise again. Basically it is about these two characters. One is a female werewolf and the other is like a warlock detective or something, and they're kind of like natural enemies, but her friend gets murdered and they are kind of forced to work together to figure out what's happening, and I assume there's probably more murders of paranormal creatures. The world building was interesting, but I really just wasn't interested in the two characters at all, and I could see it was really trying to build them up into like being a romance, and I just didn't care. It's an urban fantasy, which is usually my kind of thing, but I just wasn't interested. I just could not get into these characters at all. So yeah, I DNF'd that one pretty fast, maybe about 40 pages or an hour or two into the audiobook, I think. I'd say this is a soft DNF. It's one I could see myself maybe picking this one up again in the future, but it just didn't hook me, basically. In terms of the ongoing books then, of those two, I've actually now finished them because I'm filming this a little bit into September. I got ill and I'm behind, so I won't really tell you about them because you'll find out about them in the next one, but I was in the middle of two YA fantasies. And then the other book is one that I'm still actually reading, but I have almost finished. And that is my buddy read with Jules Gemhart of When the Moon Hatched. I am really close to finishing at this point. I'm not enjoying it, sadly, though, so you may get a bit of a vent review about this one in the future, so look forward to that in my September wrap-up, I guess. So those are all the books that I'm still reading or I DNF'd. So now we're going to go through the actual books that I did read, and as I say, I'm going to try and keep this quite brief. I don't really want to do a really long wrap up this time. Yeah, I'm not in the mood. A lot of the books I was reading, to be honest, this month were either for projects or they were me trying out YALC authors. I'm obviously not really going to talk about the project stuff because they've got their own videos to come about those. So the first book that I finished was Bad Girls by Jacqueline Wilson. This is a middle grade contemporary fiction, basically about this girl who's quite shy and gets bullied in primary school. I think she's in primary school at this point still, but like upper end of primary school, maybe just about to go into high school. I think she's like 10 or something, and she's like really lonely, and then she ends up like striking up this friendship with a teenage girl that's just moved in across the road. Kind of it helps her make her feel better about herself, and they have a really sweet friendship, but basically Tanya is seen as like a bad girl, so her parents aren't very keen on her being friends with Tanya, and then some things happen which unfortunately to them being separated. But I really enjoyed this one. This was a very nostalgic read for me, and yeah, you'll see it in my Jacqueline Wilson video coming up in the future where I'll talk about it in a lot more detail. But yeah, this actually did hold up for me. I gave it a 3-star. I actually read a short story collection because I had been to Julia Armfield's, not a lunch event, but she was doing a talk about her new book, Private Rights, which I still haven't read yet. But I loved All Lives Under the Sea, and I hadn't read her short story collection at that point, so I picked it up whilst I was there. So this is Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. This was her first book, I believe, and it's all just like weird, dark short stories, basically. A lot of it is very feminist, and I really enjoyed this, actually. I gave this a 4 overall, which for an anthology is pretty good. As always, I tend to like tab these and rate them, so I'm just gonna quickly go through them and give you the spark notes of what I thought about them. So there are 9 stories, I think, in this collection. It's not massively long. First story was about a girl who turns into a praying mantis. I gave that a 5-star. I really enjoyed that one. Then we have The Great Awake, which I gave a 4-star. Basically, this is about this like strange phenomenon happens, and people just stop sleeping, and their sleep kind of manifests itself as like a weird doppelganger that kind of ends up living with you, and it's very weird and very odd, but I really liked it. Then we have the collectibles, which I gave a 4-star also. This is very Frankenstein vibes, to be honest. Basically very weird. This girl has a breakup and sort of creates her own perfect boyfriend, I guess, in the basement. But I had a good time with that one. The next one I didn't like as much. I gave this a 3-star, and this was about a girl who she has like an adopted mother who has a wolf basically as a pet, who she didn't really treat as a pet, she treats as like her baby girl, and the two get very close, and she also kind of goes wolfy. It was a bit odd. It didn't really get a good conclusion, so I didn't really love that one as much, to be honest. Then we had Stop Your Women's Ears with Wax. I gave this a 4-star. This was really fun. Is this about the band? Yes, this was about this weird band who seemed to be like sirens or something, and they had this weird hypnotic fold holding everybody, and we're seeing things from like one of the people who was like helping run the tour, basically. This is weird phenomenon of this band and how it's like driving their fans crazy and stuff, and that was really fun. I enjoyed that one a lot. But then we had Granite, which I gave a 3-star. This one was just kind of odd. I didn't quite click with this one. Basically, it's about a woman who kind of struggles to find a person to connect with, and she ends up getting with this man who is apparently perfect, and then he kind of starts turning to stone. Then we have Smack, which I also gave a 3-star. This was all about jellyfish and this woman, I believe, who kind of ends up staying in this house that belongs to her ex, and she won't leave. That's kind of all it's about, really. 4-star was my next one as well. This was Cassandra After. Basically, this is about a woman whose girlfriend dies and returns from the dead. And then the last story, which was Salt Slow, the actual title of the book, I gave this one also a 4-star. This was really weird. Basically, it's like the whole world has kind of flooded, and it's about this couple that are kind of living through it. And yeah, it's very introspective, but I really liked it. So yeah, overall, this was a really solid anthology. I'm looking forward to actually reading Private Rights maybe in another month or two. I think I can fit it in. So yeah, really enjoyed this. Highly recommend if you've not really checked out anything by Julia Armfield before. This is like a very good taste test to her work. Then I read a graphic novel, The Girl from the Sea by Molly Knox Ostertag, I believe their name is. And this is really cute. It wasn't anything amazing or that stuck with me, but basically it's about this girl. She lives in this like little village. A mermaid comes up from the sea and wants her help, and they kind of have a little cute romance. There's a lot to do with their friendship circle that she's in as well, and about her trying to balance like her friendship circle and like how she appears to her friend as she's kind of like hiding the fact that she's a lesbian, which she obviously develops a romantic relationship with this mermaid. And yeah, it was really cute. I enjoyed it. I would probably pick up a copy, honestly, in the future, because it's something that was sweet, and I would reread it because it was really cute. Then I read 2 manga. I finally got around to reading volume 2 and volume 3 of The Summer Hikaru Died. I love this series so much. Like, it's so good. It's so creepy. It gives me big Higurashi vibes, but in a much more subtle way. And yeah, I just love this. I devoured these one after the other basically really fast. For anyone that doesn't know, basically this is about a boy called Yoshiki, and his best friend Hikaru goes up to the mountains one summer, and when he comes back he is not as he was before. It's very creepy, lots of folk horror. It's starting to get more of like a mystery element now as we're going in. We're starting to get like a deeper understanding of there being something genuinely wrong in the village, and this being a wider thing than just what happened to Hikaru. And we're still kind of learning what the creature is that Hikaru is, really. But yeah, it's really good. It's a psychological horror. It's kind of a boys' love, but in a very loose sense of the word. But there's definitely like a weird romantic connection that Yoshiki has with Hikaru. So yeah, really love the series so much. I picked up volume 4 the other day and I've already devoured it. And yeah, I just love this. This is like my favorite manga right now, basically. So I also read 4 non-fiction books this month, 3 of which were for projects. One was Brittany's memoir, The Woman in Me, which I really enjoyed. That'll be coming up in a video likely in October. I also read But's a Backstory, which is about the booty. I actually quite liked it. It was better than I thought it was going to be. I had a good time with it. I gave that one a 4-star, I believe. And then I also read Doppelganger by Naomi Klein, which I didn't enjoy as much as I wanted to. It was a little bit too political for my taste, to be honest. I gave it a 3-star overall. And then the only other non-fiction I read this month was actually a self-help book about resilience, which is actually just called Resilience. I listened to this by audiobook, actually. It's by Liggy Webb, and it was okay. I always find it hard to rate self-help books, to be honest, because it feels like you only get out of it what is useful for yourself. So it's not really something I choose to rate, but I just gave it a 3, I guess. It didn't really blow me away. It didn't really tell me much that was new, but it also wasn't dreadful. So yeah, it was okay, basically. I also read 2 books for the Goodreads Awards, which was 2 YA fantasy books, Blood Debts and Where the River Knows. You'll see my full thoughts about these in my Goodreads video, but basically I did enjoy both of these quite a lot. They were both pretty solid 4 stars, I would say, and I'm very excited to read the sequels of both of these. This is a Egyptian fantasy about a girl whose parents die, and she goes out to Egypt to an expedition to try and work out what happened and the mystery around it, and she kind of gets embroiled in a mysterious tomb of Cleopatra. And yeah, this was very good. And Blood Debts is despite how it looks, this is actually a modern day fantasy set in New Orleans, all about these magical families. And our main characters are these 2 twins called Clement and Christina, who are trying to deal with a family curse that is trying to destroy them, while also trying to solve the mystery of their family's kind of fall from grace within the magical community. And yeah, this was also really good. I enjoyed it a lot. The next book I read was actually a sci-fi, and it was my book club book of the month. I was unfortunately too unwell at the time because I caught flu to actually attend the book club, but I believe most people did actually enjoy this one. And the book we read was Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki. I'm probably mispronouncing that, apologies. And I really enjoyed this one, actually. This was a very cozy kind of sci-fi, but with some real stakes in there. And I kind of saw it as this weird mashup between sci-fi and fantasy together, which I didn't really expect. And it really kind of worked. So we have like one story basically, which is a sci-fi story, which is about this woman who owns a donut shop, but she's actually like a retired space captain. And she's fled from like the galaxy where she's from, because there was a lot of war. And she's fled there with her family, like her aunt and her children, to Earth, essentially. And she's kind of in hiding there. And whilst they're there, they've basically set up a donut shop, and that is kind of their life now. And the other side plot is about a woman who has made a deal with the devil, basically. And the deal that she has made means that she essentially finds a bunch of talented violinists, because she was also a talented violinist. And she kind of cultivates their talent, gets them famous, and then she trades their soul to the devil, basically. And she has a certain quota to meet, and she is on her last quota, which will finally kind of like complete the deal. And she finds this young transgender violinist who is struggling, and she takes it under her wing. And she starts to realize that things are not as simple as she kind of had assumed it was going to be in completing this deal. She then also meets the donut shop owner, and they kind of form a bond, and it helps her reassess things, I suppose. And yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I loved how we had 3 perspectives that were from our donut shop owner, from our woman who made the deal, and from the girl who was going to be like the new sacrifice. And I enjoyed all 3. I thought they were really good. This was just a really wholesome, inspiring kind of book. And it really was like, there was such a love of music in it as well, which I really appreciated. And I honestly highly recommend it. If you want like a cozy sci-fi, or if you want a sci-fi that maybe is not quite as like hard hitting as like some of the sci-fi out there. You want just like a nice soft story, really recommend it. Another book I read was sadly one of the lowest rated ones that I read this month, and this was one of the Yalk authors that I read, and this book was called The Changing Man by Tomi Oyama-Kinde. I'm sorry I butchered their name most likely. And this is actually a horror, but it's classed as a YA, but I would honestly kind of say it's closer to middle grade. It read very young for YA, and basically it's about this girl who has gone to like this boarding school. I think, is she a boarding school? It's a very prestigious academy kind of thing, and I think she's there on a scholarship program from what I remember. The difficult thing is that I read this around the same time that I read this book Kills, and they're both kind of dark academia kind of things. But basically in The Changing Man, there is this like urban legend of this person called The Changing Man who kind of like, they meet a certain person, maybe someone who's like misbehaving, and then their personality suddenly shifts and they don't seem to be like as they were anymore. And this was a really odd one. I liked certain parts of it, but I didn't really get super invested in the friendship group, unfortunately. Our main protagonist was kind of an asshole to a lot of people, which I didn't enjoy that much. And the twist was interesting. It gave me big Get Out vibes, quite honestly. And it was an interesting premise, and I do think the twist was interesting. But it kind of went in a different direction from what I was expecting. And then it got a little bit juvenile as well towards the end. Like, how they kind of solved the issue felt very Scooby-Doo, to be honest. So this was just a book that I think had some really good ideas. It just didn't really work for me, unfortunately. I gave it a 2.75 overall. It certainly wasn't dreadful, but it just did not quite, like, live up to the book that I think it was trying to be. Okay, so on to the last 4 books now, and this was a very mixed bag of books, I would say. These were all books that I think I had very high expectations of going into them, and I had mixed experiences with some of them. Some of them did live up to those expectations, and some didn't. So let's start with one of the ones that I feel mixed about. So for those who don't know, YALC, which is the YA Literature Convention that I'm going to in November, was actually originally founded by Mallory Blackman, who is a very famous YA author who wrote books that were very famous, I want to say in like the early 2000s, it may have been the 90s, but I've never actually read from her before. So I figured it was time that I finally did pick up one of her classics. So I picked up and read via audiobook Noughts Crosses. And it was a very mixed bag, I have to say. I still don't necessarily know how I feel about it. I thought it had some great ideas. The reverse racism that is the storyline is interesting. I don't necessarily know if it particularly works all the time. But anyone that doesn't know, basically this is like a dystopian sort of book. And it's set in the society where people are split up into noughts and crosses. So noughts are white people basically, and they're considered like a lower class. And then crosses are black people, and they are considered like the ruling class, the nobility, that kind of thing. And there is a lot of racism between the two. It's spread over like quite a long time period. And we basically follow this girl who is a cross and this boy who is a nought, and they are kind of friends, and then this kind of develops into a romantic relationship, but it gets really messy. And I also don't like how young she was when the romance kind of developed. I didn't expect this to go over such a long period of time as it does, and I really didn't like the direction that the ending took. I thought the ending was very depressing, and it obviously did kind of fit the tone for the book, but yeah, I still don't really know how I feel about this book, quite honestly. It's a whole series, actually, and I'm not going to be checking out the rest of the series. I think the first book was, like, enough for me. Like, I do think it was well written. It's certainly one of the better, like, YA dystopian books out there. There's a lot of YA dystopia, and this one, I think, really isn't afraid to tackle some heavier issues and to really go there with how dark it's willing to go. And yeah, I just feel very mixed about it, basically. So I think it was good enough that, like, I gave it a high 3, but it's not a book I think I'll ever want to revisit. The other one that's, in fact, I realised of the 4 that I've read, I feel mixed about all of them apart from one, so we'll leave that one to the end so I can gush about it and end this on a high note. So I also read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. This is probably obviously, but I read this because the sequel, The Housemaid Secret, won the mystery thriller category of Goodreads, so I will be reading this next month before that, but I figured I should actually read like the one that comes before it because I had a feeling it would be important. And this was an interesting read. I read this really fast, I will say. Like, this is a compulsive read. I got through it in like, I think I started it in the evening and then I finished it the next day. I really was struggling to put it down, which is amazing. So it was very readable, but for the first half of this book, this just honestly felt like a made-for-TV movie. Like, it was really not great. I say it was compulsive, like I wanted to know what was happening, but it wasn't really doing anything amazing, and it wasn't great. It was very much like kind of following the lines of where you thought it was going to go. And at that point, I was like, this is a 2-star, maybe. Like, I don't hate it, but this is just very obvious. And then we got a twist after the halfway point. Also, by the way, the main character feels very naive for that first half, which really put me off her. But yeah, then we got a twist. And I don't know if I really liked the twist, but it hooked me back in. So I think because of that, I had to raise the rating a little bit because it did shock me. I didn't know what it was going to do. It really surprised me. And whilst I can't say I loved this, I don't know if it's one I'd ever reread either, but it was a solid twist that really got me. And whilst I don't know if it made me particularly like the characters anymore, I appreciate that it surprised me. I appreciate that it really hooked me in for that like last part. So I'm gonna say I would rate this as a very high 2, maybe just sneaking into a 3. Like, overall, I sort of think this was brilliant because the first half was so obvious. But I appreciate that it flipped the script, but it just took so long to get there. And then it was very heavily about domestic abuse, and there was an awful lot of sexism. There was a lot of stuff about women's mental health, which I still don't think was dealt with very well. But I thought it was pretty solid once the twist hit. So yeah, it was an interesting read. I am actually very interested to carry this on just to see where it's going, because I did like the main character more by the end because of some certain things that happen. So yeah, it was weird and I liked it more than I expected in the end, but I still feel like I can't rate this any higher than a 3 because that first half was just not good. Speaking of books that sadly were not good, I'm really sad to say this. Honestly, this just didn't work for me. This is Juno Dawson's new book. This is actually a prequel to Her Majesty's Royal Coven series. And I don't know if I really went into this with any kind of expectation. I didn't really know what this was going to be. Like, we're all kind of waiting for the 3rd book in the series. And then she decides to bring out a prequel, which is basically set around Anne Boleyn, who is obviously Henry VIII's wife. We're back in Tudor times, and it's all about that and about the coven of witches that surround her. And I really thought it was going to be about Anne Boleyn, and it really wasn't. This is a weird book because I don't really think it had much of a story, to be honest, and I was kind of struggling to get emotionally invested in any of the characters in the story. So basically we follow 2 timelines. We follow a timeline when before Anne Boleyn has been beheaded, and she kind of has like a romantic lover called Grace who is in the coven. And then we also follow another timeline which is after Anne has been beheaded and kind of the repercussions for the coven after that, and the fact that one of their number has betrayed them. Sounds interesting when I say it like that, but it just kind of felt messy. And I think I liked the scenes that were set back in the past more because I liked actually being able to see what the fuss about was with Anne Boleyn and like that little bit of a romance that we got, but because you already knew that she was dead, you knew where it was going, and we saw this through Grace, who very much kind of idolized her. I don't think we ever really got to know Anne Boleyn that well, to be honest, which is a shame, because I kind of was hoping we would get that. And then the stuff that was in, like, the future, when they were trying to keep the coven together, when they were trying to find who the traitor was, I just wasn't interested. It just didn't work for me, and I felt really bad. Like, I loved the writing style, so I still gave this a 3, I think. Story-wise, it's probably a 2, but Juno Dawson has gorgeous writing, so I gave it a 3 for the writing alone, I think, but this is really in its heart a 2, and it just didn't work for me, which I'm really sad to say. Like, I just didn't care for the characters. I was getting confused about who the characters were. I still don't really know if I cared that much about what happened towards the end, between when they find the traitor and what happened with Grace. It just, yeah, it was a big disappointment. That was very unfortunate. I really went in thinking this was going to be like a fun romp, that we were going to find out some things that would add to the story, that we were going to learn about how the coven was formed and learn who Anne Boleyn was and what type of witch she was, and we didn't really find out any of that. So yeah, it wasn't the story it was trying to tell, obviously, but it wasn't really a story I wanted to hear. So yeah, I was very disappointed with this, unfortunately. But thankfully, we're going to end on a high note, and during the month I went to what they called like a Northern Magic panel at Waterstones, and they had like a bunch of different authors who came from the north of the UK who were writing fantasy. And there was a bunch of really great authors there. Frances White was there. There were some authors I hadn't read from before, and I just didn't have time to read all of them, unfortunately, which is a shame, because I really would love to read from all of them. All the books sounded amazing. But the book I did manage to read was this. This is The Cautious Traveller's Guide to the Wastelands by Sarah Brooks. And I really liked this book, thankfully. This was just fascinating, and honestly, this was exactly what I wanted to read. And this is the case of a book that I basically picked up as a cover buy. I saw the books that were going to be there, and I was like, ooh, this is like a mystery set on a train in a fantasy wasteland. Sign me up. That sounds great. And it was. A weird thing as well, I recently read a book called The Botanical Daughter, which I didn't like. And this actually gave me what The Botanical Daughter did not give me, which is crazy. So, basically, this is a book that's set in kind of like an alternate universe world of our own. It's set in like the 1900s, and there is a specific train that goes from Moscow to Beijing, the other way around, sorry, is how we go in this one. But it goes this way, and it's like the quickest way there, but it's also the most dangerous way there, because the only way to get there is across this strange, spooky place called the Wastelands. No one lives there. It's full of like weird, crazy creatures. Everyone is afraid that they'll get this kind of like wasteland sickness that will make them want to run out into the wasteland and never come back. So it's a book that's very much based off fear. And we're following 3 different characters through this who are all very interesting in their own way. One is a woman whose father has recently passed away. She's never been on the train before, but her father was kind of like an engineer on the train, and he designed like the glass which keeps out the wasteland. And there was an incident recently where it did not keep out the wasteland, and no one remembers what happened, but I think people died. And then her father, it's kind of implied that her father's career was basically destroyed from this and that he died. So she goes onto this train wanting to try and find out the mystery of what was behind this, to try and clear her father's name. And then we also follow a girl, I think her name is Wei Wei. Yeah, Wei Wei is her name. And she is known as like the child of the train. Her mother was on the train and gave birth whilst on the train, and then she died. So Wei Wei was kind of like this orphan on the train, and she gets adopted by the train people, and she just ends up living there, and that's her life. So she is kind of like someone that's always been on the train. The train is very much a part of her. Like, she's not highly ranked or anything in there, but like she knows everything about the train. The train is her home, and she ends up finding this mysterious stowaway and it gets very mixed up with like the Wasteland. And then the final character is a naturalist who recently was disgraced and is going onto the train with the intention of basically redeeming himself by finding something in the Wastelands. So it's these characters with all these different motivations. They're all mixed together. We're in this like trapped area of the train, and we're on a timeline because I believe it takes like 30 days or something to get from one end to the other. I'm just double checking. 23 days is how long this takes, and like everything is split into different sections. I love that we had a timeline for this as well. And this was just fascinating. This went in some places I didn't expect. I loved the characters, apart from our naturalist, but he's kind of like an anti-hero. He's kind of our antagonist, I suppose. But this was fascinating. This had so much to say. I really ended up loving this, and honestly, if you are looking for, it's not a murder mystery, I will go ahead. Like, this gives me like Murder on the Orient Express vibes when I first bought it, but this isn't that type of book. But it is a mystery, but it's also a book about people. And it is a book about exploration. It's a book about fear. If you don't mind a book that's gonna get weird on you, I would say I would highly check this out, because I really, really enjoyed this. I gave this a very high 4, I think, in the end. So that is all the books that I read in the month of August. I think I managed to keep that reasonably brief. I don't know. I'll find out when I'm editing, I guess. That means the last thing that we have to do is to have a look at our bingo board and see if we've made progress. I'm actually doing pretty well so far with this, but I definitely have more progress to make. So let's go through it one by one and see if we've made any further improvement. To complete 5 manga series, I only read 2 manga this month. It was a continuing one of those specific series that I do want to complete, which is an ongoing series, so I'm not going to complete it anytime soon, sadly. So unfortunately, we're going to have to stay at a 2 for that one. Read 50% of my 2024 purchases. So last month we were at a 33, and I have actually improved in that. I am now sitting at 39%. We're still not at 50%, but that's not bad. I'm actually pretty happy with where we're at with that. I think we're on track. Next, read 12 TBR veterans. I really need to focus on this, to be honest. Did I even pick anything from my TBR jar? I feel like I didn't, you know. Let's just go through these books. I don't think anything that I read this month was a TBR veteran, unfortunately. No, I wasn't. So, unfortunately, that is staying as it is at 3. We did make no progress in that. 10 horror or thriller books. I smashed this, I think, last month. I'm at 13 now, but we're still going to count it because it's fun. So I definitely did read some more this month. I read The Changing Man, that was a horror. So that takes us to 14. And then I read The Housemaid, which takes us to 15. No Illumicrate Crate prompt cards, and read 10 sequels or books in a series. This is one I've also already smashed. So it's at a 19, but I definitely read more. So I read 2 volumes of Summer Hikaru Died, so that takes us to 21. Queen Bee, does Queen Bee count because it's a prequel? It's part of the same series though. So yeah, I am going to count it. Yeah, I am. So yeah, that brings us up to 22. Read 10 sci-fi books. I read 1 sci-fi, I think. Oh wait, sorry, I totally forgot. Salt Slow is classed as a horror as well. So that's actually an extra book. Sci-fi books. I read Light from Uncommon Stars. That's all I read, unfortunately. That was sci-fi, but that means we're going up to a 5. BFF Controls My TBR. I am obviously reading one of those books and have almost finished it, so I'll be able to actually get that up next month. But I don't think I finished any of the books that was chosen for me. And then finally, 10 rainy day books. Are any of these rainy day books? I don't think they are, you know. There's definitely books that could have been rainy day books on here. Like, I feel like if I hadn't have chosen to read Queen Bee, then that would have been a rainy day book. I'm glad I kind of got it out of the way. So yeah, no progress on that. We're annoyingly still stuck at a 9. But that is it for my August wrap up. Got more exciting things that I'm going to be reading in September. So as always, if you have any thoughts about the books that I talked about, please feel free to put them down in the comments below. And as always, stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!